Thank you, Darine. Good instructions. Quiet sit. When we practice Vipassana, it's to call up and deepen our wisdom, the wisdom heart, to attune to things as they are, the as it is nature of things. Yata Bhuta, Upandita would call it, the Pali term for as it is, Yata Bhuta. Similar in meaning to the Zen tradition of the suchness of things, how things are in the moment to moment, the stream or flow of experience. Vipassana is that alignment or attunement of presence, the power and presence of mindful awareness that directly, intuitively sees the as it is nature of things through the sense doors. Colors, sound, vibrations, fragrances, sensations, emotions, mental formations, all that is the suchness, the as it is nature. As it is sometimes, because it's out of our control, is difficult or stressful. It's metta and the Brahma Vihara practices that soften our hearts, strengthens and softens at the same time. So it's malleable, fluid, dynamic. And that softening is what allows us to open to things as they are. Because it would be natural to check out, to numb out, when as it is nature is difficult, is challenging, when it's too much. The last few years have been really challenging to most of us, directly or experientially through knowing what was happening in the world with pandemic, wars, shortages of food and water, and just strains, the strains of relationship or no relationship, overwhelm. A natural response is to numb out to that stress, to that the pain of difficult as it isness. So strengthening the Brahma Vihara is giving us the openness of metta, the care of compassion, and the joy for whenever we do experience happiness within, or we view happiness without, the end of a period of suffering, or even mind moments of suffering, if we look carefully, is often followed by what we might at first experience as just relief. But upon closer viewing or felt experience, it's an inner joy. It's a Dhamma joy that we experience. It deepens our wisdom. It deepens our understanding to see those subtleties, to recognize subtle dukkha, suffering, unpleasantness, and subtle joy, sukha, happiness. On Thursday, I woke up and countless days, 10 days or 2 weeks of wind here in East Oahu had stopped. And it was one of those days I call like a perfect, silky Hawaiian day. The temperature was just right, not hot or muggy, and without the wind, it was just this slight trade wind breeze, coolness. So I was just called out into the yard where I had a number of transplants over the last few months, and I could attend to them, fertilize, compost, and began to rake leaves from all the 2 weeks of or more of wind. And all I could see in the yard was this layer of leaves. So I was out there enjoying the raking of the leaves and putting them over in the compost and filling up the bin again, more raking of the leaves and checking out the plants and knowing what I wanted to water then in the morning and later in the evening. And I had the impulse to call a good friend. And my good friend lives in the southwest part of Victoria on Vancouver Island, Canada. And he answered right away, and he was out in his garden, which was also a perfect day in Victoria. Cold winds and rain had stopped after many weeks, and it was just inviting, just like here, sunny, and he was smiling and showing me his orchard, apples soon to come into bloom, and berry trees, vegetables. And we were just showing each other our gardens and then enjoying and remarking on the 55 years of our connection. We met in university a long time ago, and it was a immediate connection that has never ceased or diminished, even when there were long periods. He was a psychologist in a hospital in the Vietnamese War. They call it the American War in Vietnam. And long career as a psychotherapist in Southern California, and now retired with his Canadian wife in Victoria. And we remarked to each other how he was a stalwart, an anchor, a grounding person, was called a rare and precious human being in Buddhist terminology, or a Kalyanamitta, which means an admirable or spiritual friend, a lovely friend. And the same, I was for him. I was that same anchor, and like an old, ancient, deeply rooted tree. And we'd always been that for each other. And just to be able to say it again through the 55-year history, how dear we were to each other. And to refresh that sense of a personal spiritual friend, anchor, a Kalyanamitta. What we might call a primary Kalyanamitta, primary spiritual friend, maybe a teacher we have or have had over years. I had U Pandita for almost 35 years. And he was 95 when he passed away, about eight years ago. And he's an easy person for me to go to. And if we have an easy person in our life, to go to, where we felt immediately seen, recognized, secure, safe, protected. That we could call that our primary spiritual friend, the easy being to go for. When we practice it, we often suggest calling up someone who is dear to us in that way, as an easy and safe person that we trust, and to just bring them to heart, bringing them to our heart mind, having an image of them right here in our solar plexus, and a felt sense of them, reflecting our goodness back, which is what we feel from a spiritual friend, or a friend would feel from us if we're someone's spiritual friend. It reflects and draws out the inner goodness. So a primary spiritual friend might be someone who stands out in that way, a really easy figure, noble person, who's always evoked that sense of feeling safe and seen and okay, and draws out our goodness. And the purpose of spiritual friend is that we reconnect at times when we might lose our sense of goodness. And in difficult periods, like the last 2.5 years, of course we're going to have difficult moods or despair, to have a felt sense of the difficulty, the challenge, the panic on our planet, and surging in different areas where those challenges are prolific, like when the pandemic gets critical in certain areas, and it's people are challenged by it, families and communities, governments. And when we hear what's happening in the world with wars and shortages of food and water and necessities, we'll feel it or we'll numb out. We'll feel it and maybe be overwhelmed, or we'll feel nothing and protect ourselves that way. If we're overwhelmed, that's also disturbing in a different way. If we disconnect, we don't have to feel that overwhelm, but we also may lose touch with our goodness, which can be restored if we call up our Kalyanamita, our easy spiritual friend, or our personal spiritual friend, which was lovely to reconnect for me when I was talking to my friend John in Victoria. And we just reflected on that, how we've been that person for each other for 5.5 decades, and the goodness of that, the beauty of that, and be able to look at each other with that freshness. There's a term I learned at the Ananda temple in Bagan, which is an ancient town in Burma, or Myanmar as it's called now. I had been traveling there after a period of practicing at the Mahasi Meditation Center, and so I was walking and looking at the Buddhas within the Ananda temple. Ananda was the best friend and attendant for the last 25 years of the Buddha's life. And a Burmese man started talking with me, and we started talking about the Ananda temple and the statue we were standing next to, and the spiritual power and history of Bagan, which in past years centuries really, had been the spiritual and political, social capital center of Burma. And another nearby temple had been created by a past queen and king of Burma. And they were both practitioners. But one was the queen was in the more in the Mahayana tradition, and there were paintings within the temple, like ancient cave paintings. But here it was still similar to a cave, but it was just an ancient temple. The queen's drawings, and then next to the queen's drawings were the king's influence, who was from the tradition of elders, the Theravada tradition, the Golden Order, Swajan order, which is the order in which Sayadaw U Pandita and his teacher Mahasi Sayadaw and a whole generation of monks and nuns who have been responsible from the mid-1800s for bringing the practical Dhamma practice out of centuries of monastic enclosure to daily life and to lay people, lay women and lay men, and the shorter retreat style of a week or 10 days were popularized by these senior nuns and monks. So it would be even more accessible to the community of lay practitioners. And that's how we have it today. So just talking about that and the history of Bagan, similar to the Sagaing Hills up north a little bit, and has just the vestiges still of those traditions. Bagan is now almost entirely a tourist place, whereas the Sagaing Hills is still alive with practicing nuns, monks, and lay people after 1,000 years, sort of unbroken traditions of practice. In Bagan, that had mostly ended, and there was just these vestiges felt in these powerful temples like the Ananda temple. And so after talking about these things for a while, my new Burmese friend was saying, it feels like I've known you from before. Like when we have a recognition in talking with someone, and we might call it maybe we met in a past life, a karmic connection, friendship. And he taught me this Burmese idiom. Yezed Sonde is the Burmese term. It means water drop connection. So the idiom itself is often not understood, but I thought the image of a water drop connection was a potent image to describe that sense of knowing someone easily. Not long afterwards, I met Aung San Suu Kyi after her release of her first 6 years of house arrest. And it was a similar feeling there. It was one of her first friends post-house arrest. And we had a lot to talk about, and how she practiced during those 6 years, and she followed books by U Pandita, and not long before her release, she was allowed for monks and nuns to come visit her for a dana on the date of her mother's or father's death anniversary. She would feed the nuns and monks, and often U Pandita would come, and I would go with him. And when I would visit her alone, we'd just have tea and talk about literature, and she'd want to speak more on the political dimension, and I like changing it to the spiritual dimension. I bring her books on the birth stories of the Buddha, and try and succeed usually, having these. It activated her memory of her grandmother telling her birth stories of the Buddha at her bedtime, for her bedtime story. So that Yezed Sonde image of water drop connection. If you imagine like how two water drops close together, they look like two jewels on a leaf, perhaps, or on our fingers, and they're drawn to each other, and if they get too close, they merge, and the two water drops become one. And we can see how the meaningfulness of that in water drop connection. Two water drops becoming one. It also means the mergence of two streams into one river. That coming together, that feeling of closeness and oneness and merging with another. In the immediate moment, or in the sense, I feel like I've known you before, somewhere, sometime, some dimension. Just the beauty of that. Ananda, the Buddha's cousin and attendant, once made the statement that 50% of the life of a person was fortified with spiritual friendships. And the Buddha overheard that and said, "Not so, Ananda. Don't speak this way. The spiritual life and spiritual friendship is all of our lives, not 50%. All of our lives is fortified and nurtured by spiritual friendship, and enhances our wisdom and loving kindness, unconditional love, and unconditional understanding." And if we reflect on that, that reflects on the nature of metta. For example, when we call up the easy person or primary subject for our loving kindness, and feel that sense of an ancient connection, that water drop connection, and abide in that quality of metta that is not self-centered, it's not self-possessing, because it's not a attached love. It's not a love with conditions, where we get something back, or we expect something, or we feel something in particular, like feel good, or rewarded with nice sensations, pleasantness. The most pure and deepest meaning of metta, the Brahma Vihara, is its unconditionality, no expectation, no sense of being rewarded one way or another, and no sense of discrimination, not picking and choosing who is deserving or worthy of metta. There's this underlying sense that all sentient beings are worthy of loving kindness, no matter their disposition, no matter their behavior. And that's a huge goal, to have before us. And we let go of any attachment to that goal, because it's not easily attained. It's rare, and often in our sort of deepest retreat spaces, with all the conditions, just right, that we might feel that level of metta, the full maturity, the peak of metta, where there actually are moments metta moments of its unconditionality. There is no picking and choosing. There isn't one sentient being or group of any living beings at all, human, animal, other dimensions, that are more deserving than others. In one story of the Buddha, there's a person, and with that person, there's a neutral person, a very difficult person. In the text, it's called the enemy of that person, and then a dear person like a family member, and his teacher, like the easy person, where that flush of unconditionality is effortless. And so the person is asked, who would they choose of that group of beings if they were surrounded by thieves and murderers, and told that, we were told that we had to choose who was to be sacrificed. Ourselves, a neutral person, our worst enemy, family member, our dearest friend. And what's the dilemma there, Who would we choose? And the answer, of course, is we can't choose. Every being there, no matter what station, the purest, holiest, noblest, easiest, dear person, the most difficult, neutral, toward whom we feel no attraction or rejection, ourselves. And we can't choose. Everyone there is equally worthy as a sentient being to be alive. That helps us understand the breadth and depth, the extent of the Brahmaviharas. Everyone's worthy of compassion. When we have the wisdom to see that. In the beginning, early stages of a retreat or a practice, we may not all have easy access to the deepest wisdom of care and compassion for all beings. So we start with those who we know and care about who are currently suffering. That's the easiest place to start, particularly if they're not suffering greatly, deeply. Just to get going, just to activate, sort of kickstart the stream of care for their pain, compassion for their suffering. And in each one, when we do joy for the happiness of a being, yes, it's easy to start with someone very near and dear who's currently enjoying the fullness of their life and accomplishments and are really doing well. And we have no envy or jealousy. And it just makes us feel joy. We smile at the thought of this being in their current happiness and state of fulfillment. But the unconditionality and the direction of that Brahmavihara, as well as the metta and the compassion, karuna, same with the mudita, empathetic joy, the direction of it is the unconditionality, that we feel happy, we feel joyful, the heart's response of joy wherever we see happiness, whenever we see happiness. It's not one group or person or being that deserves our attention and feeling of joy toward their happiness more than another. But that's the peak. That's the mature height of the mudita. The unconditionality of upekkha, the Brahmavihara of mental equipoise, stability of mind, the deepness of the still mind that's neither reacting, that means not drawn to what's pleasant or repelled by what's unpleasant, nor does it do the opposite thing of numbing out, checking out, dissociation, disconnection. The upekkha, being an alive emotion and a spiritual emotion, remains connected and is tuned in to the dukkha of things as well as the sukha, not being repelled, judgmental, running from or suppressing the dukkha, and not attached to or inclined to the sukha if it meant avoiding the dukkha. The power of our wisdom practice of Vipassana alongside of the Brahmaviharas is that acceptance of the as-it-is nature of phenomena, the yatha bhuta of nature. And that means there's always going to be difficult, dukkha, feeling tones, experience, dukkha vedana, within ourselves and as we view the world. Not hard to tune in to dukkha nature, especially the last few years. It's been pervasive, and often intruding on the quiet of our lives. And as well, the sukha nature of life, the sukha yatha bhuta, sukha as it is nature, the unconditionality of accepting that without needing to cling to it, attached to it, by avoiding the other half. We accept both. Both are true. And it's just the yatha bhuta of the moment, the as-it-is nature of this moment. What is it? At this moment, it's difficult, challenging, unpleasant. And the tendency to reject it or be aversive or judgmental or deny it, repress it. Another moment might be sukha experience, fulfilling, delightful. And we can abide in that healthy and strong Dhamma happiness, Dhamma joy, Dhamma good feeling that's not saddled with attachment and clinging, that actually diminishes the power and purity of abiding in happiness. And that abiding in Dhamma joy, happiness, is what carries us through practice, step by step, stage by stage. It's the happiness that comes from a fully collected, unified mind, heart, body that deepens our practice. It's out of that happiness of the still mind that we see the truth, that we see the yatha bhuta nature of things, the anicca, changing nature of things, the dukkha nature of things without needing to reject, judge, suppress it, and the sukha nature of things without the clinging. When we lose touch, when we do use, by conditioning and by nature, when we use checking out or numbing out to experience, to disconnect, to protect ourselves, and when we feel the pain of that sort of the split of that we split off from things as they are, from the yatha bhuta nature, often just to think of our spiritual friend reconnects us really with our goodness, our deep sense, our inner core of abiding goodness, beauty, our inner Brahmavihara nature. And when that helps, when that thought formation helps, we abide with that person. And it was thinking of my friend John out in the garden that I then was inspired to call him. He just happened to be out in his garden with his phone. And so then hearing his voice was a further amplification of that goodness. And when we have a visual connection with a primary or personal Kalyanamitta, spiritual friend, then even more So might we have access to our own goodness and restore that sense, the feeling that comes in through that relationship, that flow, that stream of worthiness, because we feel seen, accepted, recognized, that goes right to the goodness within, right into our heart. And how our spiritual friend too seems to light up with the sound of our voice, with a visual connection, with a revisit, a refreshing of a long and prolific, profound friendship, such as the one I have with John. And then, to find that that's true, to find by connection, by the presence of Kalyanamitas, admirable, lovely friendships, it certainly seems to nurture and maybe supercharge that recognition, acknowledge that we do feel held, that we do feel worthy, recognized, and seen. And then we're able to do that same with others. And it spreads, it overflows, not just with our personal Kalyanamita, but just in general, going to the market. If I pause, take a moment, and look into the eyes of the checkout person and say, how are you today? And they often feel the energy, the immediacy, the honesty, the reality and sincerity of that, and they light up. And they say the truth. I'm doing okay. I thank you. Well, I'll be off work before long, and then I'll feel good. Or, they respond however they respond. But for a moment there, they're in that connection. They're in the flow. They're in the stream, the relationship stream of one person feeling their goodness, connecting with another person's goodness, even if the other person doesn't, at that moment anyway, connect with their goodness or feel it. For, micro moments there, they do connect with it when they accept our sincerity, our compliment, when they feel seen and acknowledged and worthy of that friendship, as short as it might be, just at the checkout place. You do it continually, and that person begins to recognize you, and the next time you might go through the same line, and the person lights up again. Because you're a source for the connection to their loving kindness, their sense of goodness, even if they don't know it. That's a wonderful feeling to be able to spread that. I have it with the mail person or the UPS delivery person, and I've been here for 2.5 years in one place, almost longer than I ever was in my youth, because I'd be traveling or off at university. And it's nice to, the UPS person, hey, Steve, how you doing? Or the mail person, she is driving by or delivering mail. I'm out there in the garden, and she'll, same thing, how are you, Stephen? And I'm fine, how are you? It's just, it's short, it's momentary, but there's some transmission. There's a transmission of that Yezed Sonde, that water drop connection. It does a lot for a person's day and overall for their life. One moment, the Buddha said, even the whiff of a scent of metta has an effect on the universe impossible to know, impossible to understand. Just a micro moment of metta. Its affect throughout the universe and on ourselves is more profound, the Buddha said, than all other mental states, save one. And that one is a wisdom insight moment that releases the forces that oppose unconditional love. Wise care, compassion, and the beauty of taking joy in others' well-being. The evenness of the emotion of connected but non-reactive equanimity, mental equipoise. It's beautiful and nurturing just to reflect on that. Remembering our spiritual friend, because some of them, like U Pandita for me, have passed away, but energetically, I feel him all the time. When I first met him, it was like a Yezed Sonde connection. And, he remarked that he recognized me. I didn't know what that meant. It was a translation of what he said. But until later, I really didn't understand it. But it was like what we might call a karmic connection. You seem really familiar to me. And that was the energy between him. And also his presence and his mirroring of me was unconditional. Just who I was, this sort of frightened young new monk in this monastery, in this dimension that was so foreign to me. Foreign in appearance and foreign in sounds and new food and just so many new things that were difficult in the early weeks of being in the monastery. It was his presence that held me and fed me. And I felt from him the unconditionality of his love. And so I immediately trusted him more than I had ever trusted anyone in my life, which made for a really beautiful relationship. I trusted his instructions. I would take them up and just go and do it. And when things were difficult, I reflect on the relationship and the trust I felt for Sayadaw U Pandita would transfer to the instructions, and I would just keep doing them no matter how frustrated, and no matter how much I try to change up things. I just know, come back to the simplicity of feeling what was happening in the moment. This sensation, this sound, these mind formations, this breath, just this moment. So I think I might end there just with taking note, emphasizing with all of us the relationship between wisdom, or Vipassana practice, and the Brahmaviharas, coupled with Kalyanamita, the spiritual friends, which all of us are to each other, our teachers and fellow Sangha students, a combination that hold us and hold our preciousness as a rare and precious human being, sentient being, in the practice that we do, the challenges that we do, and how it helps us find rest. It helps us find the connectedness, the oneness of the still mind, the non-reactive mind, the mind that's not always seeking to get something or something else or to get rid of something, but just abides, learns to abide with the yata bhuta, the as it is nature, and to look for the subtleness, the little subtle moments when some dukkha disappears. And we're with that moment of relief, which if we pause, we recognize as actually a Dhamma joy, a Dhamma happiness. The moment that dukkha, our pain, disappears. It might be brief, but it's poignant. And the moments of release where everything kind of falls away, which is the aim of our practice. To recognize when everything disappears. The release of holding, the release of grasping, the release of craving. So with that, we're happy, Darine and I are happy to take any questions you might have or comments you might have, perhaps related to Kalyanamita, spiritual friendship, the challenges, how you found it helpful, or any Dhamma practice question you may have. Matt, I see a raised hand and a blank window with your name on it. And we can't hear you if you're trying to talk. Maybe you didn't mean to hit the question, Matt? Oh, having audio issues. Okay. Well, just speak up if audio issues fall away and you feel a moment of Dhamma happiness when that dukkha disappears. Anyone else with a question or comment? Hi, Trevor.
Hello. Thank you so much for the talk today. It came at a very timely moment for me because I came back just traveling last week, visiting family, and which I thought in many ways was a very I guess the way I'm describing it as a successful trip perhaps is a little bit telling. A successful trip is where the wheels don't fall off the bus and we all end up in a ditch. But there was also a connection that I made with my nephew, which was very special for me. But I came back feeling exhausted. Until we had this meditation sit today, really not aware that I was suffering, that I had a lot of, I think some very old hurts came up for whatever reason. And I was just disconnecting. I was just trying to push it away with everything I could. And so your talk came very timely, so thank you. It really, really touched my heart there. I have a number of spiritual, like easy spiritual friends, as you described them. Some have passed, some are still alive. And I guess my question for you was, I know I can reach out to them, but were you speaking literally, like I should just as you did with your friend in Victoria, pick up the phone and call them? Is this the suggested course of action, or is this something could be more subtle and just as part of my meditation? sort of more of an abstract thing. Is there a difference? Does it matter? That's my question.
Good question. And also thank you for the description of your successful family trip. That, that brings joy. We can take mudita in that. It's meaningful because all of us have families and we understand what an unsuccessful family visit might feel like and what a successful visit might feel like. And that, that says that you had a lot of the Brahma Viharas currently engaged for that to happen. Coming back exhausted, tells another story that did it feel one way? Did it feel like you were putting out more energy and maybe less was coming back? I'm just saying that as a reflection, not to answer that. As far as your question, what is the right moment? And should we do it with a moment's mindful reflection in our practice? Shall we actually call? Both. I reflect on John often, because it brings joy, and I reflect on the connection, which I can do any time. We're in different time zones, and to catch him in that magical moment, we're both in our gardens. It's unintended, unexpected, spontaneous. It just happened to be a good moment, and I was well aware. I could have emailed him in advance to find out if he was even around. And it just happened to be that way. And so I would say, if we feel the impulse, and it's a right moment for us, and we're prepared for it maybe to be a right moment or not for the spiritual friend, just to do it, to go through with it. The impulse itself and the intention itself is the most important, the most poignant, and the most powerful, because we're already abiding in that the fruits of spiritual friendship, what Kalyanamitas feed us, our own goodness and beauty and deepening of the Brahma Viharas. And then if the intention blossoms into the actual visceral connection where there's a voice, a picture, or a presence, all the more amplified and poignant and deeper the love and the wisdom. And when it's not appropriate, when it doesn't feel timely, then yes, when we're sitting to reflect on a spiritual friend, often deflects, the move for difficult mental moods and spaces that are challenging to us in the moment, and it gives us the energy then maybe to open up or soften into them, to recognize them. Or it's appropriate when things are really difficult to change the direction of our focus and abide noticing other sensations or sounds or other mental formations. That's okay too. The aim is just as long as we stay in the present moment, it doesn't matter what we're paying attention to. But see and abide, relish, when there is the right moment and we are connecting, whether or not we follow through and have a direct connection with the spiritual friend, if we can't control it, just being there with that person's image or a memory of the relationship is helpful, is useful, and provides further deepening of the Brahma Viharas and wisdom practice. So thanks, Trevor. Does
Thank
that
you.
answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
Good day.
Okay. Wait, Darine, do you have anything to add to that? Please. No?
I think it was
Oh,
complete.
okay.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Hi, Kay.
Hi, Stephen. Darine. Um, I think I have a question around a spiritual friend, and I'm making new friends who want to practice, and I'm wondering if there was any moment that you felt with Saida that a sense of like attachment that's like not helpful, or um,
My attachment, or
yeah, I think
yeah,
so. Yeah.
were there moments where I felt attachment that wasn't helpful in the relationship with Sayadaw?
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, of the honesty of our connection and the total unconditionality of the support I felt from him, the love we had for each other, like with John over the last 5.5 decades, I don't remember that any attachment of mine, which surely arose, became a hindrance in the relationship. I don't remember any feeling somehow left out or jealous of another relationship with another student of Sayadaw, or there's so few rough moments. I don't remember at this point. I don't even remember one. It was a magical, classic, mythical teacher-student relationship. Surely there were disappointing moments, which were healthy disappointments, that help release in my mind attachment. That's where we grow up in relationships, when the idealization of someone, teacher or friend or spouse or partner, whatever, when we de-idealize. It's similar to in the stages of wisdom, when there's dispassion and disenchantment with life. We're no longer allured by all the pleasant colors, sounds, sensations, and mental states, and beings that we like versus beings that we don't like. That disenchantment and dispassion are insight, our wisdom, that carry us further along the path. So I would say that my relationship improved when I began to feel I was standing on my own feet and wasn't this fledgling, like, new bird leaving the nest. Because at first I felt really held by him, and I felt like one of his fledglings. Since there was a part of me that really surrendered completely. As I said, I trusted him more than I ever trusted anyone. And I just then did what he said to do. And things flowered from there. So when I did gradually feel that I was standing on my own feet, it was a healthy detachment. So it probably an accumulation of just little things, nothing that stands out. Yeah. In our real life, in our daily life, often it's something that does stand out. Someone does something and we're really disappointed. But we get over it and we grow from it. But then also the relationship matures, where there's this healthy non-attachment, because we began to recognize the same imperfections that we have. And the striving for perfection, whether it's on ourselves or projected, that we project perfection outwardly. I began to see and understand his humanness as I'm talking now, in memory. And as I traveled with him back to his home area and just learned of him and his family and his history, there were just little ways in which I just saw his imperfections.
That's helpful. I'm just finding that disappointment from when I then it becomes either sadness and grief or either dispassion and healthy, kind of like a strength and more energy. Uh,
Yes.
Nothing really changes, but I'm just trying to see the subtle difference of where that directional change is happening. Um,
Where what directional changes? Sadness and grief?
yeah, or dispassion and
Or dispassion, yeah.
yeah,
Well, dispassion is understanding, it's insight. Sadness and grief can lead to that, but sadness and grief are a different emotion that that we can grow from and evolve from once we recognize and feel it as true and part of our being, our body, mind. Whereas the dispassion is we can't provoke it. It's just how wisdom unfolds and how the path of insight unfolds. That would be the difference that I recognize.
yeah.
Maybe you have something to add to that, Darine. No? Okay. Good question. I guess Matt never got his sound issues helping, but we all send you unconditional loving kindness and compassion and joy for success when you do overcome the sound issues. Hi. Hi, Majda. You have a question?
Well, it's not so much a question. Can you
Yep.
hear me?
I can hear
It's
you.
not okay. It's not so much a question as just an expression of deep, deep appreciation um, and gratitude for all these beautiful connections uh, on Sundays with you guys. Um, I'm not a technology person. I never thought in a million years that through this Zoom technology, I would feel so deeply connected to you all and to the things that you say, you know? And when you were talking about connecting with somebody, even just at cash or something, or smiling or saying something, I do that often. And I feel something coming back from the person, and it's very simple
Yeah.
and nourishing. Anyway, and one last thing. Sometimes I think of where everybody is scattered all over the globe, and it just seems like magic that we can all be together here on this screen. Anyway, so thank you ever so much.
You're welcome. And thank you. And it's been the same experience for us. We had no expectation. And with the exception of Jesse, who's more a techno person, Michelle and I certainly were hugely intimidated
Yeah.
when we started this 2.5 years ago. When we started this Zoom connection, and we, had didn't have much expectation. And in fact, more foreboding.
Mm.
Oh no. But it turned into this, magical
Yeah.
Sangha
Yeah.
beauty and depth,
Yeah.
which we also appreciate. So thank you for expressing that.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. There we go.
Are you a techno person, Darine?
No.
Well, you know more than me. You often know how to host these things.
Well, yeah, today was reminded to record, so thank you
Oh, good.
for that. One of the, thank you.
Everybody's helping our beautiful,
Yeah,
perfect imperfections.
yeah. Thank you, Kate. Yeah.
Well, if there's no more comments or questions, then you put into practice. Make this a Kalyanamita week, if you wish, where you start noticing, how it feels to have a spiritual friend, how it feels to be a spiritual friend. We can be a poignant spiritual friend, even if we don't have a clue where the other person is at, what their take on spirituality, where they live in the spiritual world. We don't need to know. It doesn't need to be, we don't need to reflect on someone we know everyone is a spiritual being. And the practice is to not discriminate. That's what makes it unconditional. Kalyanamita doesn't love because of anything. A Kalyanamita loves, cares. It feels joy, delight in others' happiness, even if it's just momentary, because they smile, because we smiled at them. So see how it feels to take up Kalyanamita, being one, having one, this week. And thank you for. Oh, do you have something, David? Are you raising your hand?
Actually, it's a question more for a techno kind of person, maybe Jesse, but maybe you can pass this along. I like Majda. I love this connection that we have, but and it's harder these days to find the give dana button than it used to be. I would give more often, but I'm hard pressed to find out how. So if you can have a technical person get a hold of me or something, that would be great. Because I'd like to give more than I have been lately.
Do you know, Darine? Unfortunately, we don't have Jesse, because he'd answer that immediately. Go ahead.
I think in the invitation for Sunday Seeds, I believe that at the end, right, there is a place where it says if you want to donate, you press a button or there's a link or something like that. Yeah.
It seems like that used to be the case, but I'm not sure it's the case anymore.
Okay, then we have to investigate. As a responsible Kalyanamita, we will investigate, David, and get back to you.
Thank you so much. Now,
You're
I
welcome.
also, while we're on the line, I do want to say that I think it was 2 weeks ago tonight, you had a reference to what I guess I would call the issues and people of the islands, Polynesia, Micronesia, Malaysia. which really touched me. I spent 20 years in Melanesia, and it's the islands are such a small part of the world, but they have so much to teach us. So I was just thrilled when you mentioned Mariners Field Days of the Islands.
Good. I'm glad. It makes me happy. I'm delighted.
And
Thank
just-
you.
Yeah, thank you.
And also, David, there is a link that it's been posted here for where you can give Dana. And if you read in the chat, there is the link there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Be well, all sentient beings. Take care of yourselves and each other.